All right. What's up, everybody? And welcome to What's in Your Glass again. I'm your host, as you know, Carmelo Anthony. Before we get going, though, let's first welcome today's guest. Uh, you know him as an acclaimed director, screenwriter, producer, whose groundbreaking film Judas and the Black Messiah was nominated for 5 Academy Awards. Uh, so please welcome to the show, Shaka King, my brother. Cheers, my brother.
Thank you for having me. Hey,
Welcome,
cheers
welcome.
to you, sir. Thank you.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
What you drinking on over there, man? That's what I want to know. What's in your glass?
All right. So I never had this before. My boy Damian Reed, shout out my man Damian Reed, put me onto this. What's it say? Saragia, Fanino, Catarato, Di Pignatello. Very long,
that
very
that's
long.
that sounds Italian.
uh, he said it's a mix of red and white grapes.
Oh wow, I never
And he
heard of that.
knows I hadn't either. He's this is my man who he I've had natural wine, but he is a natural wine, maniac. Um, and so he knows I like the chilled reds. He was like, I got a nice chill red for you. He blessed me with that bottle. Yeah.
I never had natural wine. I hear great things about it, but I never had it myself. But I also ain't never have a wine that was red and white grapes
Right,
together.
right,
You
right, right.
know, at least not knowing it. You know what I'm saying?
Natural wine, I love it because I'm a person I just like beverages. You know what I mean? Like I'm a person who just drinks cold beverages all day long, in general. So because of that, alcohol can be tricky for me because I like liquid. You know what I mean? So I want to be able to keep going. Uh and so, what I like about the natural wine is that you could drink a little bit more and not feel the adverse side effects because it doesn't have the sulfites. And the other thing I like about it is, like, for example, I was saying on my boy last night, and we had another bottle to something else, and it's it is how, like, the reds can be really heavy
Absolutely.
and thick. I like it. I like the natural one because a lot of times the chilled reds are just like big, like hot, like a table wine, like it
Right,
just
right.
light, like you could just drink it all. It's juicy, and that just I like that a little bit more than the like leathery burgundy, you know, cigar company that you know what I'm saying? Like it's too heavy for me.
So you like the lighter wine. You like the
I
lighter
like the
wine.
lighter wine.
In the red wine world, that would be more of the like a Pinot, like a light Pinot
Yeah,
Noir. Something like
exactly,
that.
exactly.
I'm drinking today. I'm celebrating you, so I'm gonna cheers with you. I
Thank
got
you,
I got
thank
the
you, thank you.
the Moet Rosé. So I'm a
Oh,
so
yep,
I'm
yep.
it's I figure you would have something along these lines, but I'm cheering you today. So cheers again.
Oh
Cheers again.
man, salute, man. Thank you so much.
So now let's get to it, man. I got to start us off here. We both Brooklyn boys. I'll say that. You were born in Crown Heights and grew up in Bed-Stuy.
Yeah,
Right? You was in Bed-Stuy, right?
yeah. Born and raised in
I want to make sure I get that. I want
born
to
in
make
Crown, yeah, born in Crown Heights, and lived there till I was 3, and
got
I
it,
moved to
got it,
Bed-Stuy when I was 3. Yeah,
got it. So I'm from the Hook. I'm from Red Hook. So right, right there.
yeah,
What was it? What was life like for you growing up in New York? I know what it was like for me, and I
yeah.
moved out when I was 9, 10, 11.
So
But what was it like for you growing up in New York?
it was so unique. I tell people all the time the best way I can sort of encapsulate my childhood is on one end of my block there was a doctor's office, and on the other end of my block, actually on a few crack houses on my block, for a while, but there was a major one at the other end of my block, and that to me encapsulates what it was like to grow up in Bed-Stuy in the '80s. It was very much like people talk about, the neighborhood gentrifying. And I think a lot of times people think about gentrification, they think about, white people moving into a black neighborhood. But New York is a city that is constantly gentrifying. And a lot of times it'll just gentrify along class lines. You know what I'm saying? So, in some ways, a, a lot of the like upper middle class families, black families, have started to buy up houses in Bed-Stuy because they were cheap at the time. You know what I mean? You get a brownstone back then My uncle got a brownstones in Harlem, two for 40,000 each,
Right.
$40,000 each. You know what I mean? Like my parents got our brownstone, I think, for between $30,000 and $40,000. Now it was crazy looking. You know what I'm saying? Like
But he
we
got one.
had,
He
you
got
could
it. He
see
got it.
beams. I mean, literally till I was in college, until I was in late high school, you could see from one room into the other room through, the beam. You could, it was decrepit and it was a fixer up, but the neighborhood was just very diverse in the sense of economically. You had all types of black folks living next door to one another. And I loved it. You know what I mean? Like we didn't have my parents were public school teachers, so they weren't rich,
Right.
but I was the only one, so they had enough, and I I just feel like I had, it's a very unique, uh, artistic in a lot of ways experience, growing up in Brooklyn in the '80s. Um, how about yourself?
Red Hook was different. And,
Yeah, I remember hearing
I'll tell you what, for what I remember, Red Hook was different growing up. In late '80s, early '90s, like the projects was on fire. That just Red Hook was on fire. But again, I didn't know it. It was a part of my environment. It was a part of who I was. So I was in it. So yeah, I didn't really feel affected by it because we all was going through the same thing. You know what I'm saying? So we always had each other to lean on. If we needed rice, if we needed sugar, we needed bread, we go knock on on our neighbor's door next door. We all had the same issues at the end of the day. So we supported one another, we helped one another, we held each other down.
you had a
But
community.
we had a
You had a
community. But
community.
on the outside now looking at it, it's like, yo, how the hell did
Yeah,
we survived that? You know what I'm
yeah,
saying?
yeah, yeah.
Crazy.
I remember hearing about Red Hook. Red Hook was one of those places when I was a kid. It was like Red Hook, Brownsville, Bushwick during that time. I mean, I
Yes.
remember I moved to Bushwick when I was 24 years old, and I lived there for like 14 years. And I remember telling my friends from my old neighborhood from BedStuy, they were like, "Why the fuck you moving to Bushwick?" It's like, they're like, it's crazy with it. I was like, "No, it's not how it was when we were growing up." But I remember, I didn't. I mean, it's crazy. You could live in Brooklyn and not see so many other parts of Brooklyn. Like I didn't go to Red Hook until I had a job out there when I was in my early 20s. That was my first time going there. You know.
I know a lot of people now to this day that still won't go to Red Hook. So that's a whole nother. And Red Hook is changing. It's totally changing right now. You
Yeah,
understand?
yeah,
But
yeah,
I know people to this day that won't go to Red Hook. But I
yeah,
love. I just love hearing. Kind of talking about like old places in New
yeah,
York. You know what I'm saying? It's
yeah.
so much. It's so much rich history. It's just so many people that we can talk about. So many areas we can
I
talk.
love New York so much, man. You know how it is. Like the old. It's just, and I think everybody who grows up in New York romanticizes the time that they were there, of their youth when they were there. Like my New York is very different than my mother's New York. You know
Oh,
what I
fact,
mean?
fact.
And it'll be very different. Knock on wood, I have kid. Knock on wood, I have kids someday, and my kids, are raised in New York. It'll be very different from their New York. But I do feel like there's those common threads, even though I feel like also the accents, we're losing the accents,
Mm.
you know? Like there's certain tonalities. Like my mother, there are times when my mother says something and she sounds like a Jewish woman from Queens, you know what I mean? Just because like that's that accent that black people had. And like you meet black people from New York and like, "Wait, how do you sound like that?" And those accents are they're dying. You know what I
Right.
mean? Like you're not gonna hear that the Brooklyn accent. That's just gonna be gone in like 20 years.
I agree with that.
All those people gonna be dead. You
Yeah.
know?
If you had to, because you mentioned Brownsville, you mentioned Bushwick, you mentioned these places. What if you had to pick one of the one Brooklyn spot that you would want to shout out because they just held you down, they left an impact on you, they inspired you. What's that one place?
We always busy best side.
That's not, but it could be a restaurant, it could be a park,
Oh, like a
yeah, it could be a
place.
studio, it could be school, anything.
Okay. Okay, I'll tell you, it was 1084 Green Avenue, which was
Oh,
It was the house I lived in with some of my best friends, artistic collaborators. I moved there when I was 24 years old. I lived there for 14 years. It was my best friend from high school. His parents owned the building, Mr. and Mrs. Cherry. And, I'd known them since I was a child. I moved there and I just, I had a lot of just like very formative experiences there artistically, personally. The deepest belly laughs I've ever had in my life were my man's basement, my man Cav's basement. Shout out to Cav. And just that house, my first movie, that was essentially our production office. My costume designer, Charlize, was my roommate. She was making the clothes and keeping the clothes in our apartment. My editor lived upstairs from me. Cav and his sister were doing background voice work on the movie. I mean, that place to this day, like we always, and it wasn't just the people who lived in that building. We had these like speakeasies, because Cav is an MC, and we would have these just like parties and concerts in the house. You know what I mean?
Oh, so you had a whole production company in the house before you even know it.
It was really like it was truly an artistic community. That's the best way I can describe it. I mean, to this day, people who pass through those walls, through those halls, like they talk about just the effect that place had on all of us.
Indeed. And what was your relationship with sports or with the game of basketball growing up?
It was so something funny. I thought I was convinced I was going to the NBA, convinced till I was 16 years old and I saw Hoop Dreams and I was like, no, I'm not going to NBA. I was like, yo, they're way nicer than me. and they didn't make the NBA. So I'm definitely not making. Let me start taking school seriously. I was not taking school seriously. I didn't take anything seriously except basketball. I mean, we were insane about it. Taking. I mean, you would play anywhere with anything. Get the garbage. Take the garbage. Put it on the gate. Get those like mini balls you get at Great Adventure.
Indeed.
Now we're like 7 years old, 8 years old, dunking on you. I'm dunking on you. You know what I mean? Get the wire hanger. Put the wire hanger on the wire. Remember the wire hanger with the sock
ball over there.
You know what I mean? Like, and then sometimes you get, you find a spot with the triangular door hinge.
It's over. It's over after that.
Play with everything. You play with everything. It was everything. It's still, I mean, to this day, like I just love the game, man.
So even though the Nets came from Jersey, right? Mm-hmm. Now they're Brooklyn's team.
Mm-hmm.
Knicks or Nets? Because Brooklyn.
I'm gonna tell you,
because Brooklyn didn't have the Nets back then.
So when the Nets came to Brooklyn at first, because they destabilized the area so much in building the stadium, I couldn't fuck with them.
Oh.
I was like, my friend's bar was there and it's closed now. I couldn't fuck with him. But then after Dolan let Oakley out in cuffs, done. Right. Done for life. For life. Like I have no problem with the players on that team at all. I mean, I was really happy to see them have the kind of season they had this year. But I hate that team because of what they did to Charles Oakley. I mean, truth be told, like I had a problem with them not retiring John Starks number. And I love Steph. But it was like, yo, this dude embodied just like I just feel like as an organization, they have, and James Dolan specifically has no respect for the players on it that play for his organization. Fucking Patrick Ewing, you got Patrick Ewing getting carded. What is going on right now? You know what I mean? So I became a Nets fan. But once that shit happened to Oak, I became a Nets fan. Especially once Oak started showing up to Nets games, I was like, all right, I'm a Nets fan. And it's crazy because I ended up getting season tickets right before they got KD and Kyrie, like maybe like a month before, because I knew that I was like, they're gonna get somebody. And for the first time I can actually afford these, let me just try and get something. And worst come to worst, like if I can't make a game, I could probably sell it. And then it was like hitting the lottery. those
Yeah,
tickets.
yeah, inside trading.
I mean, basically, that's how it feels. That's how it felt.
Well, let's talk about let's jump to yeah, you know, filmmaking,
Yeah.
right? It's like moving to the next phase of your life, right? Uh, college, right? You were you know, I was told you were a political science major that turned, you know, that film enthusiast, right? At the end of the
Mhm.
day, and you went to Vassar College, if
Yep.
I'm
Yep.
okay. What sparked that? Like, what sparked that switch?
So, I wanted to study writing at Vassar. Actually, in high school, like I said, I wasn't a good student, and I remember my junior year, I took this creative writing course um, with this teacher named Mr. Eric, and it was the first time I'd ever gotten, you know, any kind of praise for my academics. Doing well in that class. It was my first time since like fifth grade, and I just found something I took to in a way that I hadn't taken anything else really ever. And so I knew I wanted to write short stories. I knew I wanted to be a writer. I went to Vassar thinking I'd be able to take a creative writing major, and there was no such thing. And so I was taking political science just because, I come from a very, you know, not politically in terms of, political parties, but politically in terms of the way that the folks think. I come from that kind of family and that kind of background. So I said, okay, I'll take this, studying critical race theory, things like that. And my junior year in college, my best friend, Chris, who's my editor to this day, he was a film major at Vassar. And in order to you couldn't take production courses until your junior year at Vassar. So your first 2 years of filmmaking, of your film major, you were just taking theory courses. And so junior year, he starts to pick up a camera and he's like, yo, this is amazing. You'd really enjoy this. And so he came to me and I I was like, you know what? Let me see if I can double major in filmmaking and in political science. Since I've already fulfilled my political science prerequisites, maybe I can just take nothing but film courses and take the production courses while I take the theory courses if they'll allow it. And they allowed it, but then without them knowing, I just dropped the theory courses and was just taking production courses for the next 2 years. And that was when, once I got, because filmmaking married my love of storytelling, love of music because I was really obsessed with music and wanted to specifically produce music. And so even though this wasn't quite music production, it was an opportunity to marry visuals with sound, which was something that you know I never felt like I'm not Jimi Hendrix in the sense I can see music and see colors, but I did always music was always a very visual thing for me. And so that the opportunity to do that as well. It was just all these things that I didn't think of myself as having a visual sense back then. But I actually could think in pictures. I think so, I had enough of an innate ability to build upon that. You know,
Right. Was that like a was that a transformative experience, or for you, or you just like, and you've been hooked ever since, or did it grow on you like throughout your time?
it I mean, I think it was I just took to it. I know I could tell I took to it because I would always be the last person in the edit room. You know what I mean? Like from even when I was at Vassar, like I would look up, at like 5 a.m. and it'd be me and maybe like one other person. So I was like, I was, and it, for a while, I made around the same time I made beats as well. And I remember I didn't like I I had a I run out of gas when I was doing that. Maybe 4 hours in, I'd be like, I'm bored of this. I want to do something else. And I never felt that with filmmaking. I to this day I can edit a piece of material until my eyes are closing. I just love, I get obsessive, about it.
So when you
Um,
when you say, not to cut you off, when you say you ran out of gas, like you just hit roadblocks, like you just couldn't, you couldn't follow through it on the creative side. Like what
yeah,
what's that like? What's that like when you say you ran out of gas?
it actually was disappointing because um, I just realized that as much as I love this thing, I'm a listener. I'm not a creator of music. You know, I didn't enjoy the creation of music. I would be in the studio with my friends, and I would want to be doing something else.
Mm.
And that never felt that way in editing a movie. You know, even when when you first get back your footage, you always think it's the worst thing you ever made. You always are just like, this is terrible. How am I going to figure this out? And that never goes away. But
Right.
um, but as soon as it you go through all of that, I'm like, okay, let's get to work immediately, and I will be there until this I can make sense of this thing that we shot. I never felt that way with music, you know.
Was there like a certain film, or mentor, or anyone that you had in your life that like inspired you to become a filmmaker? Because I know you said you was into music, but
Yeah.
who or what inspired you to get into filmmaking?
Man, it's
Or was it
tricky
or
because
was it or was it just part of the whole
it was part of
creative
the whole
process,
thing.
right?
Like it was part of the creative process. Like I tell people all the time, like my creative inspirations artistically, a lot of them come from music. Like when I learned about the way that Miles Davis collaborated with other artists,
Oh,
that was that exploded my mind. I was like, yes, this is I want to take a page out of that book. Um, you know, just what, Madlib and the RZA, you know what I mean? The way in which they produced work, the way in which they layered material, the way in which, Madlib is like, it's done. It doesn't have to be clean, doesn't have to be perfect. He likes the mistakes. I was like,
right.
yeah, I gravitate to that. I like that texture, you know. Um, a lot of my heroes I found artistically in filmmaking come from music. Yeah.
What was it like? Like before I ask you that, what was some of the lessons you learned from that? From I would say making say newlyweds, right? Like what was some
Hmm.
of
Hmm.
the lessons that you learned from making newlyweds, and like how did that shape like kind of your work today? You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, yeah. I think one was just really being open, because that was a film that so much, especially in the latter half of the film, changed and was developed on the fly. You know, one of my favorite scenes is there's this moment where um, my friend, rest in peace, Paul Corzin, is lighting his chest hair on fire, and everybody's high in this basement, and Lyle has never he's never gotten high. He's never gotten high with white people before. He's never gotten high, in like a Long Island basement. So it's very much like this is a different experience for me. You know what I mean? And he's very high, and in the midst of his experience, he sees this guy he's just met setting his chest hair on fire. This like very crazy, zany character played by my friend Paul Corzin. And Paul is setting his chest hair on fire. And that happened because he was doing that. The camera wasn't rolling. He was doing that just because that's how Paul was. And someone tapped me like, "Yo, look at your boy," and I was like, turn the camera on. Let's start shooting that. Oh, let's actually change the scene to be about this. And it was just a moment that came about because I was just open. The end of the film was very different than the one that we scripted. I hated the scripted version, and we happened to be, in shooting the scripted version. We shot the scripted version before what you see in the film, and there was a shot of it's the last shot of the film where you see Lyle and Nina, because in the scripted version they were supposed to end up together, and in the movie they don't, which I like a lot more. And in the last shot of the movie, you see them in this cab, and you see the reflections of the trees on the window, on the car window, and the reflections are obscuring their faces. You can't really see who's inside. You've seen Lyle enter the car alone, but you haven't seen who's inside the car with him. And I remember seeing that shot, and as the reflections died down, you reveal Lyle and in the car with Nina, and this leaf falls, and I just remember saying, "Wow, that looks like a dream." And in realizing and looking at that footage, it looks like a dream. I said, "You know what? It should be treated as a dream. He shouldn't end up with her at the end. let's go back and change that, and
Mm.
have a more satisfying ending. And so just being open was a big thing I got from
Well, that was
the
the
second
inspiration from that was the Mad Lib, inspiration right there too. Like just going and being able
Yep.
to make that adjustment on the fly and being able to adapt. Like you said, you didn't like that part of the script, so when you see something, it just clicked.
Yeah.
And that's when you creative like that in whatever genre, you got to be able to go off the fly like that. You
Yeah.
have to be able to adapt to any situation, to your surroundings, because a lot of times that's what make the project, or that's what gets you over the hump, when you just able to. I know I can't go straight. I'm gonna go left to get back on this road right here.
Yeah.
Though we gonna
Yeah.
we gonna we
Yeah.
gonna make it work. What would be what would be like out of the lessons learned? What would be your message to like your younger self? In filming newlyweds. Like what's that message?
Yeah.
Like what you know now, knowing what you know now, what would be your message to your younger self?
There would be two things, two big things. I think one would be just about patience, and that there is no the destination is the destination is the journey in art making, in the making of art. It really probably in most things in life. You know, with Newlyweds, I had very set plans of, okay, I do this, and then this happens, and then in terms of my career, this
Right.
will happen. Okay, I'll hit this mark, and then this will happen for me. Hit this mark, and this will happen for me. By the way, you don't control what happens for you. You know what I'm saying? Like, you don't have no control over that. All you can control is what you do. You know, and so I think one thing would just be it's like goals are healthy, expectations are not. You
Mm.
know, um, and so that'd be one thing I would definitely like try to drill in my head. But I also recognize that you got to learn shit. You know what I mean? Like you got to
Absolutely.
learn it. You got to learn it on your own. You can't. No one can tell you. You know, no one can really. People can give you advice, but no one can really teach you anything.
You could you could prepare for the fight until you get hit in the face once.
Exactly.
Until you get that
Exactly.
first punch, then you now the fight starts at that point.
Exactly.
Now it's gonna see what you
Exactly.
stand on and what you really made of and what you really about. Um, let's switch it over to Judas in the Black Messiah, which is one of my favorite movies. I think what you did with that
Thank you. Thank
is
you.
it's a masterpiece. I think that
Thank
story was timely. I think the message was needed, and I think people really needed to see, that story in that light at that time. And you couldn't have did a better job with that story. So I'll cheers to you on
Right. Thank you.
but
Thank
for
you.
that one
Thank you.
for sure. But
Thank
because it's truly a masterpiece and was it was nominated for I think five Academy Awards or something like that. Um, how did that film come to be? I mean, we know the story, right? People know the story. People heard of the story, but for you to flip that story in the way that you did it and tell it the way that you told it, how did it come about?
So I was making I made a like a pilot presentation for Killer Mike. This FX show was my first professional job, and it ended up not happening. But on that shoot, I met the Lucas brothers. We became
Oh,
friends, and one day we're hanging out, and they said, we have this idea for a movie. We want you to co-write with us and direct. And they asked me if I was familiar with Fred Hampton, and I was. And then they asked me if I was familiar with William O'Neill, and I was not. I'd never heard of him. And so they told me this was they didn't know the history, and really no one knew. And I didn't find this out until I actually met with Chairman Fred Hampton Jr. But what they'd heard and what people had been saying for years was that William O'Neill was Fred Hampton's bodyguard, and that essentially he'd drugged him the night before his assassination and provided the FBI the blueprints to his apartment.
was
Turns out that
those are
he
facts?
wasn't. Those so it is a fact that he did drug. I, it's pretty. I mean, I don't know who else could have drugged him, right?
Right, right. It's that type of
I
situation.
think it's safe to say. I think it's very safe to
Yeah.
say that he drugged him, and he absolutely gave the FBI the blueprints to his apartment. That's undeniable. Um, but he wasn't his bodyguard. He wasn't his bodyguard. That's not correct. He was a member of the security cadre. and he did drive him from time to time. He did drive him from time to time because he had a motor vehicle, and those were hard to come by. But he wasn't his bodyguard. But anyway, they said, they told me that information. They said they wanted to make a movie about these two that they envisioned as the departed set inside the world of COINTELPRO.
Cool.
And I was like, let's do it right now. Like, we have to make this right now. It was too perfect a vessel, because I recognized what the industry was like and the challenges of trying to get a movie about Chairman Fred made in the studio system. But to me, this was a way where you could get a movie like that made in the studio system, and you could get people who weren't interested in this history interested in this history, because you're making, like, one of the things that I always love is when people are like, yo, it was like a gangster movie. And I'm like, that's exactly what the trailer is supposed to make you feel. That's what these moments are supposed to make you feel. It's supposed to be like, yeah, I did see that in, this Sidney Lumet movie or this Martin Scorsese movie, that texture, that feel, even though it's in a completely different world, And so once they brought me that idea, I just was like, we got to pursue it. So I just went nuts with it.
So I mean, and you could tell you fucking did your thing on that. Like, you dove head first into that. So, and as a fan, as a fan of that history, as a fan of Fred Hampton's story, and the Panthers, and we can go on and on and on about that. The way you brought that story together, right? What was it? What was the challenge though? Because it was all good, it was great, but what was that? In the art of filmmaking, it's challenges, right? No matter how great of the story it is. What was some of the challenges when directing this? And
the biggest challenge for a movie like that is you're trying to balance and navigate history and dramatic license as a filmmaker, as an artist. Hardest thing to balance, because you're also talking about a history that's sacred to so many people. Sacred in the sense of, when you look at what the FBI and the United States government did to the Panthers, for some members of that community, that history, that legacy literally is all they have. Talking about people who they were in prison, their family members, their loved ones in prison. To this day, you got, Sundiata Kohli, Mumia Abu-Jamal. To this day, old men and women, Assata Shakur in exile, and I mean, Russell Maroon Schultz, like, to this day, so many Panthers in prison, and freedom fighters in prison. So it was like, you can't just say, well, it's more convenient for the film if we do it this way, or you couldn't take shortcuts, which you need to make a movie, not just narratively, but a lot of times just to get your budget. Like, something is, we had to sometimes combine 3 characters into one character because we couldn't afford to hire 3 actors.
Wow.
How do you balance that?
Wow.
So it was very hard. That was challenging, and it was a gift for us to work with Chairman Fred Hampton Jr. and Akua Nijeri, because they could be like, listen, this one you can't. You can't
mess with that one. Yeah,
you can't mess with that one.
Indeed.
And it was like, okay, we gotta. So we have some boundaries that are set by someone other than us. Because if it was left up to us, if we hadn't had their involvement, we would have made so many mistakes that would have hurt so many people. And in our minds, we'd have said, oh, this is just a small thing. You don't know it's a small thing until you've been through that process. As anybody, when you think about it that way, like, somebody goes to your house and they pick up a glass and the glass breaks, but that's like, that glass has been your family for 100 years, and it just looks like a regular glass. It's like that.
So, hearing you say you had to put 3 characters into one. Like, how did that actor react to that?
Well, the actor wouldn't know,
Oh, he wouldn't know.
but he would. The actor would, for example, like, well, in this case, they did know. Ashton Sanders, who plays Jimmy Palmer.
Yeah.
That was initially, that was based on uh, a panther named Larry Roberson, who was killed by the police when he intervened in, they were harassing some elders in a grocery store. He intervened, and words were exchanged and gunfire was exchanged. He ultimately was shot, and then while he was in the hospital, he was, many people suspect, killed in the hospital. And that was one where, because there were other aspects of the character that were not like Larry Roberson, but that we needed for the movie. Because, that character, if you look at the film, every character plays a role. And I remember I told Ashton when we sat down, because he was initially cast as Jake Winters. And I said, he was cast as Jake Winters, and I saw a photo of him on Instagram, right? And just his personal style. It was just him as him. And I said, man, you a 60s nigga, man. I said, I was like, you can't, I was like, we need one guy in this movie that like feels like dudes from that era. Who really, and I was like, and Ashton, I was like, yo, bro, like, you really are really one of those dudes from that. I was like, you're just not from today, man. And I was like, so we need a guy that looks like that, and a guy that he doesn't say a word. He has like very few lines in the movie, but the way that he carries himself physically, we put those clothes on him, the way that he smokes a cigarette, it immediately evokes in your mind, yes, 1960s, 1970s. I've seen this guy, and he was really a big part. His character was really a big part of setting the time and place. But Larry Roberson wasn't that kind of guy. You know what I mean? Larry Roberson he didn't drink. I don't think Larry Roberson smoked. He wasn't that kind of guy. So it was like, okay, we can't portray Larry Roberson in that light. We also need this. We need to show that the Panthers, would intervene if regular citizens were being harassed, and they would face the wrath of that decision. So how do we juggle these two things? And I remember it was something that we spoke about with Jimmy Fredden Jr., because he was the one who was like, yo, Larry Roberson didn't drink, Larry Roberson didn't smoke. That can't be Larry Roberson. And I was like, okay, well, what if we change the name to Jimmy Palmer? Is that something that you think would be permissible? And he was like, it's not my fate. He's like, that's not my, I don't love it. But in negotiating, I will allow that to happen, So it's things like that. I mean, and that's like, that was an easy one. I mean, we had conversations that we couldn't figure out a solution until, the 25th hour on set. And it was just like, I hope we figure it out, because no one's satisfied. The family's not satisfied. We're not satisfied with doing things the way they'd like. How do we find that common ground? I don't think I'll ever experience anything that difficult in making a movie again.
So what was the family satisfied
with the film? Ultimately,
yes.
Very happy with the film. Very happy with what it's done. Jimmy Fredden's legacy, and the Panthers' legacy. Just everyone played their part. Every single person played their part.
And you needed that. You needed everybody to play their role. You needed that. Yeah. So what's next? What's next for you? What's on the table with you? What's going on?
I'm producing. I'm doing a lot more producing now for TV and movies. I just it's gonna be announced, but I got a first look deal somewhere in TV. Doing some producing there. And then myself, Ryan, Charles, and Rel are teaming up to do make a movie, hopefully shooting in fall of next year, I hope. That I can't talk a lot about, but it's about political insurrections in this country. And it's like, it's gonna be an insane movie.
I mean, I can hear it. I can hear it. Yeah. I know you want to say something about it, but I'm
dying to say something.
I already know how that goes. You want to say some shit, but it's like you got people over your shoulders. You gonna get a phone call after you.
Exactly.
I already know how that goes. Let's bring it back to kind of what's in your glass, right? I got a few kind of quick fire questions for you to kind of close out.
Okay.
You know, the people and I always like have to know, um, you know, what's in your glass for like special occasions or some occasions. So we
Yeah.
got quick
Yeah.
fire. It
Yep.
doesn't have to be, you know, a label specific, but what's your go-to wine and drink? You get where I'm coming from.
Yep.
So
Okay.
you're unwinding after a long day, right?
Mm-hmm.
What's your go-to?
If I'm unwinding after a long day, probably a chill red. I'm probably gonna go with a chilled natural red. Um, Juicy, fruity, with carbonic maceration, so it's got like a little bit of bubbles to it. Yeah.
You might want to go to champagne, man.
But it's what I love about the carbonic maceration is that you're like, is that bubbles or is that just like my
Right.
mouth? You know what I mean? Like
Right,
it's so subtle, you know. Like and it's only for maybe the first 10 minutes and then it's gone. You know what I mean?
It get
But
flat.
I
It get flat after that.
It gets flat. Exactly.
What you're out at a nice restaurant.
Mm-hmm.
What you going to?
Gruner. I'm getting a Gruner.
Mm,
I'm getting a Gruner. Yeah.
okay. You celebrating a big win, a new project. You know, Judas and the Black Messiah just came out. The world is on fire. You want to celebrate? What you going to?
Valentine Triple X.
Oh, you was ready for that. You was ready for that question right there.
Nah, I'm probably drink some champagne.
Okay. What? Let me see. Nightcap. What's your nightcap? You just winding down, relaxing. Okay,
rum.
so
Yeah.
Puerto Rican rum, Dominican
I'm
rum.
gonna tell you specific.
Yes. What rum is it?
Zacapa 23.
I love it.
Or El Dorado 12.
I haven't had the El Dorado. I had the Zacapa. Zacapa is incredible.
Zacapa is incredible. But all that type of rum, that's like my favorite, man. You know, like just rocks, no rocks. And I actually had an old fashioned made with Zacapa recently, and I was like, this is
old fashioned?
Yeah.
I gotta try that. I gotta try that.
Crazy good.
I gotta try that. I haven't had the Zacapa old fashioned.
Yeah.
That's new. I might have to, you know, make that a household drink over here.
It's dangerous. It's dangerous, man. It's dangerous.
Nah, but Shaka, man, I just want to say thank you, man. You know what I'm saying? Like we at the end, I want to say thank you so much. You know, for just joining me for a glass. You know, it's 5 o'clock, 6 o'clock, midday.
Bro, it's an honor.
It's happy hour.
It's happy
hour. You know what I'm saying?
It's a true honor, bro.
I want to just, you know, say best of luck to you and with everything you have going on, man. And anything we can talk about, we can speak about, we can collab on. I'm here for you. You know, let's work, let's get something popping. But you know, I just want to say thank you again, man, and cheers.
Yo, cheers, bro. Thank you so much.
Absolutely. Keep going, my brother. We support you for sure.
No, thank you. Likewise, man. And I'm so happy to see what you're doing out in Portland, man.
Appreciate
so happy to see what you're doing out there.
I'll talk to you soon, champ.
All right, brother.
All right, my brother. Peace.
Peace.